Slurpty derp, how's it going, my G's? Hope you're all doing sick. I've got a bit of a crazy hair going on today because I've got my bandana on and it's sort of not quite long enough that it doesn't stay back and it's a bit spiky up there, but I thought, you know what, it looks pretty wacky, let's just leave it. Anyway, today we've got the long-awaited, or at least Kerry on Patreon has been waiting for it. Shout out to you, bro. The track breakdown for Shiver, my last release. So as I drop a new tune, I like to let it simmer for a little while, and then after a certain amount of time, I'm happy to share with you a little breakdown. I sometimes drop them on Patreon. Some of my older track breakdowns are on there, but this one I thought I'd do as a public one on YouTube for you guys. But if you wouldn't mind sparing a €1 per month and joining my Patreon, it really helps me out, and you'll also get loads of other content, some free Vital presets, phase plant presets, a bunch of other stuff coming out there in the near future as well. So I appreciate that, and make sure you subscribe as well to the channel. It really helps me out a lot as well. So anyway, let's dive into the Shiver breakdown. So yeah, absolutely one of my favourite tunes so far. When I finished the track, I was listening to it and raving out to it loads, like on my headphones, like at the gym and stuff like that. So it's not like one of these tracks where I personally also don't, love it. Like, it's one of the ones that I wrote that I really sort of objectively love as well. So what we've got then, I've pulled back up the original kind of composition project, because what I tend to do these days is I'll have my first project where I'll compose everything, and then after that I'll get into a project where I sort of bounce out the stems, and I'll do like some stem mastering. If you guys ever want mastering, by the way, you can just email me. The links for that are down below. You can master your track like it in stems, costs a little bit more, or just the final file as well. It's a little bit cheaper because it doesn't take as long when it's just one file, But yeah, what I tend to do is I'll like bounce my track down into stems, master those, yeah. And that will just be sometimes a few adjustments to like bring the drums up or the bass up, kind of depending on like what needs to be pushed and what needs to be put down. And then colouring the stems a little bit with some different plugins to give them a little bit more character. And then I'll bounce out the stem version, and then I'll like put it into a final master project where it's just the one file. And then I'll do like a heavy master like on just the one file, which involves like a lot of EQing and things like that, really minute details, so just so I can get the best out of the possible sound with the space that I'm given in with the headroom, so when it comes to bouncing out the track ready for mastering, I'll typically just turn down the output sort of about -4, bounce it out like that, and then I've got some space to do some boosting with EQs and things like that. But while I'm producing the track, and like so 99% of the time, master's on 0, and then I've got a clipper, which you can use anything, but I've just got the Camel Crush because I like the way that it has no display. That's really exciting to me. Yeah, on Logic you can just click the controls and then basically turn off all the effects and just have the master and the mix on, and the Camel Crusher will automatically act as a clipper. On Ableton, you've got like the saturator or the glue or the compressor. They have a clipper on. You just turn off the effect and just turn on the soft clipping. Or if you're on another DAW, then I just can't help you. Anyway, so what I do then is sometimes, like on this project, I'll boost the volume a bit more into the clipper. So the clipper's cutting everything at 0, but I might have a bit of extra headroom in the track to bring everything up together. So here I've just kind of boosted the whole master like 0.77 because I just had that bit of extra space. And then after the clipper, I'll have a little -0.01. So this is basically like, if the track was at completely 0, it might be technically orange or red, If you have it just a tiny bit down, it's technically in the green. So if there's any like normalization or things that happen when you bounce it out, because it's like at 0 or above, this will avoid that from happening. So I don't know too much if it actually makes a massive difference, but just in case, you can have that on so it's like technically under 0 when you bounce it out. Then I've got the span afterwards, which is like my sat nav. So this is just to check like the levels of everything. I don't worry too much about LUFs and things like that. I know most people like talk about luffs like it's, you know, like it's some kind of Christmas present or something. Like, what are you going to get for Christmas? Oh, I'm going to get 7.4 luffs. Like, what are you talking about? Like, at the end of the day, for me, like, I'm making music. I thought maths was really boring at school. So my philosophy is make something sound as good as it can and as loud as it can. And I don't care too much about the numbers. So with each sound, like, there's a level to how much you can push it before it starts to distort. So I'll just push it up to that level where it still sounds good. And if it's gone too far, back it off a bit. And there you go. You've got your balance, you know? Because if you get too bogged down in numbers, you'll end up paying attention to those and not your ears. And that's the wrong way to go about things, in my opinion. So anyway. Banging track, obviously. And the thing about this one with regards to the composition was that Reebz did like almost the whole song. She basically composed like a whole 4-minute track when she sent over the idea for a new song. So it was like already written in a way. So it's actually really difficult because I had to sort of rewrite it in such a way that I could like add my style to the song, but without like it was difficult because the composition was already so strong. So like trying to find a new bass melody and new bass rhythm that made the track even better was difficult. So I ended up taking like a long time. I ended up taking almost 1 or 2 months away from the track because I couldn't think of any good ideas. So I just kind of left it for a while, and then I came back to it like after a month or two. This is while I was in Colombia still, and then eventually I wrote like a better bass line, which is this one here, obviously. So why don't we start with that then? Because that was that was the part of the song that really made it more unique after what I was given originally by Reebz. So most of the basses are actually crafted from an older preset pack from Vital, the Mind Shift preset pack. Because what I often do is like I'll use some of the basses that I make like while I'm producing, like at the same time as I'm building the preset pack, so I kind of like end up using them together. And I actually released the pack like first and then released this song like much later with all the sounds. So those of you who bought the packs like straight away probably would have been able to write this song before it was even released if you if you only had the same creative ideas as I do for the melody, then you could have written it as well with the sounds. But anyway, so you could see here they've already all been bounced out because this is like the final composition project. So obviously I've already gone through the whole thing of, you know, writing in the notes in Vital and then like bouncing them out because, you know, I like to bounce to audio like as soon as possible. But we've just got a number of different sort of call and response patches that are originally from the Vital Mindshift pack, like a few different basses and a kind of sub underneath as well. What's this one here? Yeah. Yeah, I've got this. It's quite interesting because what I ended up doing was I bounced out like all of the basses as one. Once I'd like written them and had the different parts and the call and response, I bounced out the whole thing and then I made a new version that sits over everything, and it's just like the side information. So on this one, I put on like a formant filter to give the harmonics some difference so that they don't phase too much. And then I put a feedback light on, so it's a delay at 100% mix with a ping pong mode. Really short, like 35 seconds. So you got this really quick ping pong delay happening. And then, then just like taking out the low end with an EQ. And then it's like this extra stereo layer that's just on the sides. Probably accounts for like 5 or 10% extra volume in the whole sound. So although it's not massive volume wise, it does like fill in the gaps in the stereo, so that's quite important, that one there. So here as well, like sometimes what I'll do when I'm like pressed for time or just trying to be quick is I'll sometimes bounce out the basses like together. So, you know, if there's like a couple of different ones, I might sort of group them as into one file. So you can hear here, there's like just a sub. It's just like a flat kind of sine wave with like maybe a little bit of harmonics and distortion, but not much. And then into like the more growly mid bass from the Vital Mind Shift pack. Yeah, so there's a few different sounds just in that one file. But yeah, that's just because I was sort of pressed for time. And then what's this one here? Yeah, it's kind of response one. This quite funky one. Also just a Vital patch. Not like super processed or anything. Just kind of, yeah, got a nice melody on it. And that one didn't really have enough bass underneath it. So I ended up like just beefing it up with a sine wave underneath. So my philosophy with like layering up sine waves and sub basses underneath is the original sound good enough? Like, does it have enough weight and sub down there? If so, then don't really need to worry too much or waste too much time redoing the sine wave just to get it like 1 or 2% cleaner or better. If it's not good enough, then quite simply just add another one in underneath and EQ the top one out, so that the bass here that didn't have enough sub, you can see I would have EQ'd out. That's side EQ, that's stereo EQ. So I've EQ'd around 117. Just cutting out like enough space for the sub, like at least sort of up to 100. So this guy down here then has the room. If I put an EQ on there, you'll know that it's got, you know, it's just mostly there like 50 to 60 hertz, you know. But I left a bit of space for it to have its whole, all of that power down there. So that's really important to make sure that you've got enough sub like in the whole bass line as a whole, you know. So if there's some sounds that don't have enough, no problem, just add another one in, you know. And yeah, so it's quite a crazy bass line arrangement. So there's a lot of like little fast parts that happen, especially towards the end here. It's one of these Vital patches had like quite a quick sort of LFO on it. So that's basically it for that part. Like, I can't really talk too much more about it. I'll talk about the processing of the bass now though as well. But yeah, like wasn't super loads of resampling, to be honest. I just kind of used like a bunch of the Vital presets and just took the time consuming part was arranging the different sounds in a way that sort of added energy to the groove. So that's something that just took a lot of trial and error, and that's the part that I got stuck on and had to come away from and come back to like 5 weeks later. So so yeah, that's the part about the basses, and you only really get 2 rounds of these kind of mid basses. Now to the second 16, I kind of switch up the drums, and then we have the same basses again, just with like some slight variations in the kind of arrangement, but like not too different, you know. And then we go straight back into the breakdown, and then in the second part of the track, when the drop comes again, in the jungle, I don't really have any of the mid basses in the second time round. It's more focused on the jungle drums, and so there's just like some sub bass and then some sort of Reebz, which was actually originally Reebz's Reebz. She programmed one in, but it's sort of a bit more softer and atmospheric, but I thought I'd use that for the second section. So I would just have like the backup sub, you know, just my Vital like sine wave, and then that's a sort of reverbed out version of the Reebz, but the main one is here. Sort of a lo-fi, almost low quality kind of Reebz, and that's the one I was in the original composition that Reebz sent, because she kind of produced some elements to it. But you know, obviously I wanted to like put my own style on it, so I, you know, changed most of them. But that was part of in the original that I was sent, so I left that in for the second drop. So that's quite easy for me. Yeah, so we'll talk about that in a moment. So let's just talk about the bass processing then. So yeah, again, like it wasn't too much because the vital patches were already kind of pretty good and doing the job. But here, you can see that I have added some in the individual basses, like especially this main one. I've used the Fire, which has been quite important to get like more high end harmonics. So this is the free multi-band distortion plugin, and yeah, Wings Fire. You can sorry, I just got to drink that before it goes cold. You can choose the different modes, like they always respond differently to different sounds. So this time I used the single sine, just drive it up, and I'm only driving up the high end, so the low end and the bass is still left like sort of as it is. Only driving up the high end, sort of around 1K and up, and then you can mix it off a bit. So drive it up, mix it back, and there's also some cool settings here, like the rectification and the bias. You can change a little bit the tone of the distortion, so you just kind of change the tone a bit until it kind of suits the bass line, you know, so it kind of adds to it in the best way. And then yeah, that's that on there. There's obviously a bunch of like side chains and things, like you can see the LFO tool using that mostly, and doing like I often sidechain the bass a bit and then like bounce it out with the sidechain on, and then like I'll sidechain it a bit more if it needs to. So you can see here I've added like a new sidechain, but only at 21 out of 100 volume, so it's more subtle. So a little bit, I treat my sidechains a bit like EQing. Like I find often that you have to you don't have to, but I like to do it like smoothly, like a little bit at a time sometimes, you know, because like if you go too overboard with it, then it's harder to get back the bass that you've cut out, you know. But if you go like a little bit under, then later on if you need more, you can just add on another one, just do it like a little bit. So I just like sort of stack my side chains quite a lot in a subtle way. Same here for the snare. I just had a little extra subtle little volume dip for the snare. And then yeah, EQ wise, you know, it seems I've boosted the bass group a little bit in the kind of treble here. Just to guess, it kind of was having a bit of a hole in the spectrum there, so that's probably why I did that. I've got the SDRR on here to add more brightness, so I like this one to boost up the treble sometimes. It's got a nice way it boosts the high end. This is the Klanghelm one. And then, yeah, one of my favourite ones. I often use it for mastering, but I don't always use it on I don't always use it in the project on groups because it's quite a big one. And I don't like to do too much compression either if I can avoid it. But yeah, this one is quite nice. So I got a little bit here on the bass group, and yeah, just mix it in. Like you can see, I've used it really in a small amount. I've mixed in like 7%, so it's a bit of like parallel compression on the bass. But it's a compressor. It's a coloring compressor that adds like color. It's not like I'm actually trying to limit or squash the sound. I'm trying to add in like some analog warmth with it, you know, because it can boost the low end a little bit more. There's a tiny bit of reverb, like 7% or something in the high end only, so up to like 1.3K and upwards on the whole bass group, just to tie them together where they're like sort of separated files. That's the only reason I really do that, to fill out the high end a bit more. But yeah, that's basically the bass then. So let's talk about the drums next, because they're quite exciting. What were some of the favourite drums that I've written, I think. You can hear it's got quite a lot of stereo interest, and a lot of that's coming from the snare or the snare layers, like particularly this wood midtone here. This kind of just like wooden sort of transient sound, but it's got like loads of ping pong delay on it. So the Rift feedback light, it seems to be quite low there actually. I think that is. Yeah, that is adding all the delay though. Even at 8%, you can hear it quite a lot. Yeah, so adding a quite longer delay tail onto that sound, and that's that's layering on top of the snare. Of course, it's got some reverb on as well. The transient's probably been taken out very slightly just to let the main snare cut through a bit more. But yeah, we've got this it's Yakuza snare. Shout out my boy Yakuza. Probably stole that off him. I think I layered it up with some more sounds as well before. I must have already bounced out. I must have resampled the snare at some point because there was a bunch more layers on there, I seem to remember. But yeah, we got this nice fat, like synthy kind of snare, and then like really sort of organic, delayed, sort of reverbed snare on top. Then we've got a nice punchy kick. You can hear it's almost got a bit of reverb on. I don't always do reverb on the drums, but I think in this case, I've reverbed the whole group, as you can see here. So yeah, that's also a feature that I wanted to implement, is giving the drums like a really big kind of stadium feel. So in this case, I wanted to get some extra air into them. So I reverbed the high end. And sort of around 1.1k and upwards. Quite a lot though, 12%. That's quite a lot for like the whole group. But obviously, if you cut out the low end, it's not going to interfere too much because I've gone pretty high with the EQ cut. Yeah, so I've got the Wings Fire on again on the whole drum group. So this plugin has really leveled up the whole high end of the track in both the drums and the bass. So here I've gone for the Logic mode. Again, like I said before, it kind of responds differently to whatever you put into it. And then in the high end, the cutoff point is quite important. So sometimes it's less than 1k, sometimes it's more. And then the drive, just a little bit on here, mixed in 78%. But yeah, really brings out all the details and everything in the high end. So, I did make sure that all of my cymbals and everything are quite nicely mixed and balanced and everything, with the transients being on point, the EQing being on point, so that when I go ahead and add a bit of sort of distortion or saturation, I'm just enhancing the details which are already clean. I'm not kind of distorting mess, So cymbals, obviously they're in their own group. I usually do this. So here we've got a break in it as well, which is something I'm quite new to putting in my tracks, because it's normally just neuro kicks and snares with a hi-hat. But this time I thought, I wanted to go a bit more jungly, because that was the concept for the track. So I'd use some more jungle breaks and stuff. But they're still in the cymbals bus here. And most importantly, there's some compression on the cymbals group, just to keep everything in check. And also, making sure... It's difficult with breaks, because with breaks you need a bit more mid-range room, to hear the character of them. So normally I'd cut my cymbals a lot higher, but here, because there's a break in it, I've cut them quite low, 300. Yeah, so I think that's the sup break. So here are the kind of other elements that I've added on top of the break. So just a couple of various hats and rides and things. Some Vital hats from one of my packs, which is kind of just white noise hats that help fill out the high end. And then some sort of samples of some more natural recording hats, with the break as well. And so yeah, you do hear the kick in the snare from the sup break. But you'll notice that I've taken the transients off on the break and on the kick as well, I think. Yeah, so not too much, but just enough, so the priority of the transient is still with the main parts of the drums, so the main sort of synthetic kick and snare still take priority in regards to the transient, so you got the transients in there on the breaks, but they're quite soft. Yeah, so that's the full drum group then, I suppose. And obviously, yeah, with the processing, we kind of already talked about that. Again, there's just a clipper on the end, because I think they do sort of go up to 0. Yeah, because they're obviously one of the loudest parts of the track, so they do go all the way up there. There's a filter freak on there, which is doing some automation throughout the track. and I think a Valhalla reverb, which does a bit of automation as well. So like I soften the breakout as you get towards the end of the 16. You know, like I'll reverb it and take out the high end on like an automation. But that's basically the drums and the bass. So let's go ahead and talk about the vocal next, because I'm sure you're all excited about that. So here, the vocal, processing wise, again, I seem to have used the fire, this time with another different colouring. So this is the Arctan this time. And I don't think I would have used it as much. Yeah, I think it's just 50% here, because I don't want to like over distort the vocal. That would be not very nice. I try to dissect. So yeah, it's a case of just slightly enhancing the high end once you know everything's already clean again with the fire. So just done a little bit on there. And yeah, we're working backwards. We're dealing with the whole group. So I didn't want to take out too much low end. You don't, you know, if you take out much of the vocal EQ wise, it's going to sound terrible. So you got to keep in. I try. You know, obviously the fundamental of Reebz's range is around 300 or so. I try. In this part at least. I try. Oh, but there's still a bit of like, you know, there's some harmonics down here. I try. And if I take those out, it's probably gonna. I try. Starts to sound tinny, like you need a bit of that almost rumble down there, you know. I try. But really here, sort of below 100, there's really nothing there. So that's like the cutoff point that I sort of went for, you know. I try. There's compression on the vocal for sure, because this is one instance where I do use compression a lot just to keep the volumes in check, because no one's perfect. You can't always get the same volume across like all of your lyrics or words, you know. So that the idea with the compressor, yeah, I've got two, the Shadow Hill and the Glue, but the idea with them is just to like kind of just to flatten the whole group together, you know. And so there's a bunch of different layers. So when Reebz sent me the vocals, it was like loads. So I think I ended up already going through my favorite ones, and then basically I would sort of bounce out a new version of the vocal layers together. So I had like one main one in the middle, then a couple of the extra takes panned left and right and lowered in volume. And then I think I bounced that all out together as a new file, which is the all vocals file here. So it's kind of like the main one. And then Reebz also sent like a bunch of versions of her vocals that had like super loads of delay and reverb on. So I used that as another layer kind of in the background. So this one's like really down low, minus 18 or so. Yeah. Some sort of ad-lib effects that Reebz recorded, I threw that in, these sort of whispery effects. And then in the intro as well, we've got, I think this one here is something that I would have just, picked out a little one-shot word from Reebz's overall lyric line, and then like massively delayed and reverbed it. So it's got this kind of infinite feeling. So that fills out some of the air in the intro, you know? So yeah, I like that. And then so I love to do this with Reebz's voice, is sort of have an octave down version every now and again. So here's like a... Oh, that sounds sick. I don't know what... It's already, I think, been processed. I don't know what I did there, but... I think it might have had some Ruiner on as well, that was giving it a bit of a weird distortion tremolo, something like that. But obviously it's been pitched down an octave, and it sits in the background underneath the main vocal line. But it only happens sort of once or twice here and there, so it just adds a bit of that interest occasionally. And again, one more time here in the Never Knew It Was So Cold. Never knew, yeah, that, you know what I mean. Yeah, and here I start to add in the sort of lead element that I created out of the vocal. So it's like it's the pitched down version of the vocal at minus, you know, one octave lower, and then it's got these interchangeable these two interchangeable kind of one shots that I've taken out of it somewhere. I can't just distinguish what word it was, so I don't really know, but it's just, the idea is just like a one shot human vox effect, you know? And so that sort of comes in the intro here. Sort of creeps in the background. You hear it coming in just before the drop, and then it sort of remains on the drop as well. But I think on the drop here, just EQ'd it a little bit differently. I've given it a bit more brightness so it can sort of fit with everything else a bit better. Okay, and we've got a bunch of other atmosphere stuff. So the great thing about Reebz' voice, it always sounds great when you make atmospheres with it. So it's nothing like revolutionary what I've used to create them. It's just taking little shots, you know, and then applying some effects like reverb and delay and things like that. So, but then, you know, putting them in the right spots where it amplifies the energy of the song. Okay, so there's loads of vocal stuff going on in the background. It's all atmosphere though, you know. And obviously we have these little parts where it does sort of the rest of the track does drop out, and then we get like a, you know. I never knew it was so cold in the jungle. Yeah, so this little kind of gap where we get the main vocal back in, but really just using that vocal texture a lot to fill out the high end and add the energy and air into the whole song. So really important to do that for this one. To forget. It's one of my favourite lines here. But I still lose myself to you. So it tends to be sort of on my favourite lyrics or lines that I might add in that octave down. Lose myself. That sort of octave down layer as well, so I'll save it for like the special lyrics, you know. I've run for so long in this place I belong. Here again, I'm just building up to the second drop with the vocals that I was given, and I ended up pulling out a few extra sort of takes and things to layer into the background here, because it wasn't quite filling out the spectrum enough. So I wanted to make sure it didn't sound like too hollow. So in that case, I'll just take out some extra takes from Reebz, because she recorded like a bunch of takes, and then I'll just like layer them in the background and pan them a bit left and right like I've done here. So, and left them quite low in the mix just to fill things out. Never knew it was so cold in the jungle. Here we have a break in the structure of the track, which really throws off most DJs. So it's less traditionally structured in that case, but the song kind of just wanted that, because for me it's more of like a like that was required for the narrative of the song. So even though it's harder to mix, it was more about the story of the track for me as an individual song. Like I wasn't too worried about the DJ friendliness of it, because you can still mix it easily if you know where to set your cue points and where to start the mix, you know, if you do your little planning. So second drop, you kind of I had this vocal one shot thing in the intro in the background. Becomes more of a lead featured element in the second drop, because you have a lot more space in the arrangement, because I took out all the mid basses, so you'll start to hear other things in the background more when there's more space in the mix. So here this kind of lead thing becomes almost like the lead element, you know. Super simple, just two sounds from Reebz's like random, one shots I've picked out, octave down, and a little bit of reverb and delay on it to sort of make them a bit wetter, so they got a longer tail on. But yeah, that becomes almost the lead element in that part. Yeah. And then here for the sort of last main 16, I decided to sort of feature the amen break as the sort of main element, you know. So I cut the vocal out there, so all your ears are really drawn to in the last 16 is the new break that comes in. My clean aim and break, I left it in this drums group, not the cymbals group. I think probably because I wanted to have like a little bit more low end in. Oh no, I've EQ'd that out anyway. Yeah, for one reason or another, like it doesn't go through the cymbal processing. It just stays in the whole drum group. Sort of sidechain to the kick, so we still got the original, like all the original drums in there. It's a layer that comes in on top, you know, so it's not like I've switched everything out for the amen. I've added it in on top of everything and just tweaked the transients very slightly, and yeah, made sure to sidechain it a bit to the kick, so I still have the main kick like cutting through. Yeah, so that's the main sort of parts of the vocals as well, you know. And then, you know, there's a few like whispers and other things in the background that I've layered in, like on the second drop as well, that just kind of, yeah, give a bit more interest there. So aside from that, the only other things that I've missed out that I haven't talked about are the sort of noises and textures and things like that. So because it was jungly, I wanted to use a lot of like wooden textures to like, yeah, symbolize the trees and things like that. So I've got a bunch of like loads of sound effects, like Foley things. So I've used a lot of like wooden stuff. Like you can kind of hear some like crazy stuff going on with like messing around with wood. Okay, but it just sounds wicked. So there's a lot of that stuff going on in the background. We've obviously got our leads as well, which are various things. So you have this sort of jungly, this is my favorite one, the sort of ragga blip, just from like any jungle sample pack, you know, so you can always find that easily, that one. There's an ARP there, that's from a Vital preset, that adds a bit of tension before the drop. Okay, there's lots of sort of ARPs and like movement going on in the leads. Difficult to like explain it all right now, to be fair, because I want to keep this video like not super long. But basically, yeah, taking out the low end on most of those leads, compress them down a bit so they're more in the background. It's mostly background stuff still, because the basses, the mid basses, are the forefront, so they're like doing 70 or 80% of the whole kind of lead, you know. This is like sort of the extra leads, I suppose. But yeah, some ARPs and some one shots and like little tonal hits. Yeah, so it's nothing like super crazy there. And then yeah, we've got this synth, but this is mostly this is a load of stuff that Reebz added when she sent the original. So some atmospheric sounds and like analog synth stuff, which I've basically kept usually just for the intro and the breakdowns. I kind of took most of it out on the drop. I think there might be a little bit on the drop here. Just these little up and down things that add a bit of tension, but they're really quiet. You don't like super hear them clearly on the drop. But I did like them, so I left them in there. Percussion-wise as well. Yeah, just a few like sort of breaks and things that were in the stems that Reebz sent me that I kind of, again, like sort of kept for the intro, the breakdown, and the second drop. And they're, yeah, quite secondary sounds, really. They're not like... they do make a difference, but they're not not the bulk of the mix down, you know. Same here, just like a bunch of random effects. Like Reebz literally said like loads, but again, like they're not very loud. They're really in the background. There's a lot of cutting out the lows on these ones as well. And same thing with the intro pads. I just sort of added a couple of extra pad kind of or atmospheric synth shots myself on top of the samples that I was sent. Like this one is sort of from like a Zebra preset or something like that. But the rest of it's sort of just low passed Reese. And this pad was obviously the pad that Reebz already sent when she recorded the vocals to it, so it already had this eerie feeling, so we kept that running like in the intro. And then yeah, the important thing was getting those vocals to really, you know, cut through all of that. So that's why you will notice all of the pads and things, they are like really quiet. And if they're like interfering at all with the vocal, I will make sure to like sidechain them or EQ them so the vocal really gets pushed to the front. Even the low end of the vocal, most importantly, the low end of it is driving it all through, so nothing is getting in the way of it, you know. So you got to hear that voice, like, you know, 90% of the mix down is the voice, you know, that part. You know, the rest of it's just little background stuff. Okay. So that's just a little breakdown. I could go more in depth, but then, you know, I could probably talk about it for 4 hours if I really wanted to. But then, you know, you might not ever go to sleep or ever get up to go to school or whatever you're doing. So I'll leave it with you there for today. But if you want to learn more about it or you just want more help with your production, then just book in a one-on-one mentorship session. It's by far the best way to level up your own skills. And yeah, I can happily help you guys with that. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching, my G's. Have a wicked rest of your week. Peace out. Much love. Don't do anything I wouldn't. Ciao for now.